Washington, D.C. Winter. The city was cold and gray. Snow dusted the tops of black sedans as they weaved through early morning traffic. Inside a studio tucked behind a major news network headquarters, the crew was preparing for the evening broadcast. Coffee steamed. Teleprompters flickered. Assistants moved like shadows. And at the center of it all stood Miles Carter. Miles wasn't just a TV host. He was the voice of progressive media. Sharp, fast-talking, and devastating in debate, he had turned Pulse of the Nation into a cultural force. His viewers saw him as a truth-teller. His critics? A wrecking ball of arrogance and sound bites. But no one could deny this. He got people to listen. That night, he was set to discuss past criminal justice legislation and Florida's controversial policies during the early 2000s. One of the key figures under discussion? Pam Bondi. The conversation was intense from the start. His guest, a moderate analyst named Clara Sloan, brought up Bondi's work on human trafficking and opioid abuse. "Whatever your politics," Clara said, Pam Bondi took tough stances, and some of them saved lives. Miles scoffed. "You're romanticizing damage," he snapped. "Let's not forget. She also championed harsh sentencing laws, refused clemency to nonviolent offenders, and turned her back on reform." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Are we talking about facts or just blaming for sport?" Miles leaned forward. "Pam Bondi shouldn't be admired. She should be remembered as someone who hurt more people than she helped. And honestly, she should have been disbarred." There was a pause. Even the production team, used to Miles's fire, looked uncomfortable. That sentence would destroy everything he had built. Within hours, the clip went viral. Social media lit up with both praise and outrage. By morning, the network released a statement. "We stand for accountability and respectful dialogue." Mr. Carter's comments were inappropriate and do not reflect the values of this organization. He is no longer with us. Miles stared at the screen. Just like that. He was done. His face was everywhere. Headlines, memes, debates. And yet, no one was calling to check on him. He turned off his phone. For a week, he barely left his apartment. 7 days later, he received a letter. Not an email. A handwritten letter. It was on elegant cream paper. Neat cursive script. "Mr. Carter, I heard what happened. I don't want to argue. I don't want to sue. I just want to talk. If you're open to it, meet me for coffee. Pam Bondi." He read it twice, then again. His first instinct was paranoia. Was this a trap? A PR stunt? But something about the letter was human. He replied the next day. They met at Emerson Cafe, a quiet place near Capitol Hill. Miles arrived first. Nervous, his hands trembled as he adjusted the buttons on his coat. Pam walked in, poised, calm, no entourage. She wore a simple gray coat and smiled gently when she saw him. "Mr. Carter," she said. "Miles," he replied, standing awkwardly. "Miles, then." They ordered coffee. Miles avoided eye contact. The silence was heavy. Finally, Pam spoke. "You know, I was angry. Not because of what you said about me, but because I knew you didn't mean it." Miles blinked. "What?" "I've watched your work," she said. "You're smart, passionate. But lately, you've been performing." He looked away. "You think I said it for ratings?" "No," she said softly. "I think you said it because you were tired. Tired of screaming into the void. And so you swung harder than you needed to." Miles exhaled. "You're not wrong." There was a long pause. "I was angry at more than you," he admitted. "I was angry at how slow progress is, at how the system grinds down good people. And I took that anger, and I weaponized it." Pam nodded. "I've been on both sides of the system. And I've made mistakes too. Some policies I supported, they haunt me. People suffered, but I'm trying to make peace with that. Miles looked at her surprised. I thought you'd come here to destroy me. Pam smiled. Number I came to remind you. You're more than your worst moment. After that conversation, something inside Miles shifted. He turned down interviews. He stopped tweeting. Instead, he began to volunteer, quietly, at a community justice center in Maryland. No cameras, just people. He helped formerly incarcerated individuals write resumes, find housing, get their driver's licenses back. He sat with victims of crime who were still learning how to heal. He listened, and through it all, he thought about Pam. Her grace, her courage to reach out instead of strike back. Nearly 9 months later, Miles launched a new YouTube series, Common Ground, Conversations That Matter. The first episode, a one-on-one sit-down with Pam Bondi. They filmed in a quiet studio with soft lighting. No flashy graphics, just 2 people, 2 chairs. Miles looked into the camera. 9 months ago, I said something cruel, not because it was true, but because I had lost my way. And the woman I attacked did something I didn't expect. She reached out with grace. He turned to Pam. Thank you. Pam smiled. Thank you for saying yes. They spoke for over an hour, about criminal justice, about forgiveness, about the media, about how both had learned to listen better. At one point, Pam said, "The hardest thing in politics is to be vulnerable. But maybe it's the most powerful thing, too." Miles added, "There's strength in saying, I was wrong. I wish I'd learned that sooner." The video went viral, not in a scandalous way, but in a healing way. This is the most human conversation I've ever seen. I cried, twice. Is this what hope feels like? More of this, please. Letters poured in. People who had hated each other for years reached out. Families reconciled. Teachers showed it in classrooms. Podcasts debated it. Churches shared it in sermons. 1 year after his firing, Miles was invited to speak at a university commencement. He stood in front of 3,000 students and said, "I thought I'd be remembered for my voice. But now, I hope I'm remembered for my ears, for finally learning to listen. And to everyone watching, you are more than your worst moment. And so is the person you're angry at. Because grace doesn't make headlines, but it does make history."